You never forget the sound of your own mother walking away. You never forget the way your father closes a door and never opens it again. And you never forget being 8 years old, standing on the porch in the rain, while your suitcase gets soaked, because your family decided you were no longer convenient. I wasn't a bad kid. I was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. I liked drawing in the corner, reading stories about heroes and justice. But my parents, they didn't want a quiet child. They wanted a trophy, a talking point, a mini version of themselves, to parade at their cocktail parties. Instead, they got me. So they sent me away. Not to relatives. Not to a boarding school. No, that would have required money and care. They dropped me off at my grandmother's house, a woman they hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. They left me there with 2 trash bags of clothes and a box of cereal. And they never looked back. But she, she was the only person in this world who looked at me and didn't flinch. She was old school, strict, sharp. But her heart was built like a fortress. And I found shelter there. She didn't say much in the beginning. Just eat first. Questions later. That was the first time I'd had a hot meal in weeks. That night, she tucked me in and whispered, "You're safe now. I don't know why they gave up on you, but I won't." Years passed, and she raised me like I was her own child. No, better, like I was her second chance to fix what had been broken in the generation before me. She taught me to work with my hands. She taught me how to look people in the eyes and not flinch. She taught me what silence meant and when to break it. We weren't rich, but we had enough. She had land, an old farmhouse, and dignity. More than most millionaires I'd meet later in life. My parents never called. Not once. Not for birthdays. Not for school graduations. Not even when I ended up in the hospital after falling from the barn roof when I was 12. I heard they were living it up in the city. Brunches, golf clubs, and summer homes. My mother became an influencer, whatever that meant back then. And my father, he started a chain of luxury gyms. Apparently, having a fit image was more important than having a son. But I never chased them. I never begged for their return. I learned something powerful in that farmhouse. Real love shows up every day, quietly, relentlessly. And Grandma, she showed up. She watched me graduate, top of my class. She helped me apply to college. She sold a piece of her land to cover the tuition gap. She did what parents are supposed to do. And then came the cancer. Stage 4. It started in her lungs and crept into her bones. She kept it from me as long as she could. But I noticed the cough, the weight loss, the fatigue. One night, she just looked at me and said, "I don't think I'll see you get married, baby. But I need you to promise me something." I held her hand and nodded. "Anything. Don't hate them forever," she whispered. "Forgive them. But never let them take what I gave you." I didn't understand what she meant, not yet. She passed 2 months later on a rainy morning, much like the one when I first arrived. At her door, the funeral was small, just like she wanted. A few neighbors, some of her old church friends, and me. And then they showed up. Yes, thank my parents. After 15 years of silence, they strolled into the chapel in black designer clothes like they'd just stepped off a fashion runway. No tears, no apologies, just entitlement. Like they belonged there. Like they had a right to grieve. I froze when I saw them. My mother tried to hug me. I stepped back. "Don't," I said. She blinked. "Sweetheart, we came to pay our respects." "To the woman you abandoned along with me," I replied coldly. My father kept silent. Of course, he always had a talent for disappearing into walls. Then, after the service, they approached the family lawyer, a sharp-eyed, silver-haired man named Whitmore. He had managed my grandmother's affairs for decades. Trustworthy, loyal, the kind of man who didn't tolerate nonsense. And that's when it happened. The moment that still replays in my mind like a movie I never get tired of watching, They asked about the estate, not about me. Not about Grandma's final wishes. Not even how she died. Just, what did she leave behind? My father even had the audacity to smirk and say, "I assume the house and land are worth a few million." No, Whitmore didn't answer. He just smiled. A long, slow, knowing smile. And then he laughed, loud, deep, rude. My parents looked confused, embarrassed. "Is there a problem?" My mother snapped. Whitmore leaned forward and opened a thick envelope. She left a recorded message. He said, looking directly at me, "Would you like to hear it?" I nodded once. My parents looked nervous. He pulled out a small speaker, clicked it on, and there she was. Her voice, strong, clear, and full of fire. If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. And I know my son and his wife have finally decided to show up, probably sniffing around for money. So let me make this very clear. You don't get a penny. There was a pause just long enough to let the weight of her words settle in. You left your child with me like garbage. You never called, never helped, never cared. And now that I'm dead, you want to claim what I built, what I worked for, what I bled for. My mother's face turned ghost white. My father glanced around the room, hoping no one was really listening. But they were. Everyone was. Even the minister had stopped mid-conversation. Everything I own goes to my grandson. Everything. The land, the house, the investments, the accounts, and yes, the trust fund. $50 million earned, not inherited. Built from the ground up, my hands were shaking. I had no idea. I thought we were just ... comfortable. But Grandma had been investing quietly for years, buying and selling property, saving, building, preparing. He's the only family I've had since the day you left him. And to him, I leave it all. Because love isn't what you say at a funeral. Love is what you prove when no one's watching. The recording ended. Silence took the room like a storm cloud. My parents looked frozen like statues carved out of shame and greed. Whitmore leaned back in his chair and said calmly, "Any questions?" My father muttered something about legal action and unfair treatment. But Whitmore raised one eyebrow and said, "You abandoned your son. You left him in the custody of someone else with no contact. You have zero legal standing. I suggest you don't embarrass yourselves further." And that's when I realized ... This was justice, not revenge, not bitterness. Just truth, spoken aloud, with no apology. My parents didn't fight. They didn't scream. They just walked out of the church slowly, eyes burning holes in the ground. My mother tripped on the chapel step on the way out. No one helped her, and I stood there, still as stone. Not triumphant, not gloating, just ... free. But it didn't end there. After the funeral, people started coming out of the woodwork. Neighbors, old friends of Grandma's, even strangers from the town. They told me stories I'd never heard before, about how she'd helped pay off someone's mortgage when they were about to lose their farm. How she used to drop off groceries anonymously at the church for widows. How she once drove 5 hours to bail a stranger out of jail because no one else would. She was more than just my grandmother. She was a quiet force of nature, and I had inherited more than her money. I had inherited her legacy. But my parents weren't done. Oh no. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from their lawyer. They wanted to contest the will. They claimed my grandmother was not of sound mind, that she had been coerced into cutting them off. It was laughable. I handed the letter to Whitmore, who barely glanced at it before tossing it into his fireplace. He turned to me and said, "Let them come." She was meticulous. Every document is airtight. Your grandmother planned for this. She knew them. That night, I sat alone, in her old rocking chair on the porch, holding a cup of tea she used to make, and I remembered something she told me once, years ago, when I was crying after being bullied at school. Some people only show up when there's something to take. Let them show their faces, because the universe remembers, and it did. Word got around town about what happened at the funeral. People stopped doing business with my father's gyms. Investors pulled out. The influencer deals my mother had gone overnight. She made a tearful video about being misunderstood and facing betrayal. But the comments section wasn't kind. They had spent a lifetime building a reputation on illusion. And in one afternoon, the mask had shattered. I didn't gloat. I didn't speak publicly. I just started doing what Grandma would have wanted me to do, building something real. I started a scholarship in her name for abandoned kids. I turned part of her land into a community garden for families in need. And every week I visit her grave with fresh flowers. Not because I miss her, I do, but because I owe her everything. I used to ask myself why my parents didn't want me. Was I too much? Not enough. But now I realize they didn't reject me. They rejected the best part of themselves. And in doing so, they lost the one thing they couldn't replace, me. So if you're watching this and you've been abandoned, if you've been made to feel small, unwanted, like a burden, let me tell you something. Your value isn't defined by who walked away. It's defined by who stayed, even if it was just one person. One person can save a soul. My grandmother saved mine. And in the end, she gave me justice without me ever having to lift a finger. She gave me something better than revenge. She gave me peace. If this story touched something in your heart, if you've ever been betrayed or had to rebuild yourself alone, then subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment below and tell me, who was your one person? Who saved you when the world turned its back? And if you're still waiting for that person, maybe this is your sign to be that person for someone else. We're building a family here, one story at a time. And your story matters. It's strange the way silence can be louder than a scream. My parents didn't try to contact me again directly. No calls, no apologies, but they made noise elsewhere. A magazine published an article, The Estranged Heir, Family Fortune Torn Apart by Generational Rift. The cover photo was an old picture of me, maybe 12 years old, standing beside my grandmother, holding a watermelon from the garden. The headline made it look like I had stolen something, like I had manipulated an old woman into cutting her real family out. But those who knew us, those who really knew the story, weren't buying it. People spoke up. Her friends, her church group, her doctor, her banker, they told the truth how my parents had disappeared, how I had been there every day, how I had carried her up the stairs when she could no longer walk. My mother tried to comment on posts pretending to be someone else. She used fake profiles. I could tell words like that boy never appreciated what he had or grandma was manipulated. But people replied with screenshots, receipts, and reality. Truth has a pulse, and once it beats, it's hard to silence. Meanwhile, their life began unraveling. The influencer contracts dried up. Brands didn't want the family drama. My father's gyms lost members. Apparently, people don't want to work out where betrayal lives in the walls. And as their empire crumbled, I felt something unexpected. Not joy, not triumph, just ... emptiness. I thought I'd feel something more, a thrill, a sense of victory. But instead, it felt like watching strangers fall from a building I never entered. I wasn't the same boy they left behind. That boy used to wonder every night if he had done something wrong. He used to imagine reunion scenes in his head, dreams where his parents knocked on the door and said, "We were wrong. We missed you. We love you." But that boy died the day my grandmother died, and in his place stood a man with roots. I started renovating the farmhouse. Not to make it more luxurious, it already had everything I needed. But to preserve what mattered, I kept her chair by the window. I polished the hardwood floors she used to mop barefoot. And I framed the first drawing I ever gave her, a lopsided picture of the two of us, holding hands under a tree. Above it, I placed a plaque, "Love is what shows up." That became my motto. I wasn't interested in revenge. I wasn't interested in spending money recklessly. I wanted impact. So I started writing again. Stories, essays, personal letters to kids in foster homes. I began visiting schools anonymously at first, talking about abandonment, about worth, about breaking cycles. One teacher pulled me aside after a talk and said, "You don't speak like someone who inherited money. You speak like someone who earned every piece of their soul." I smiled because she was right. You don't earn legacy through bank accounts. You earn it through scars, through silence survived, through battles no one sees. But even with all of that ... the ghosts still visit. Sometimes I catch myself looking at the phone, expecting a message from them. Sometimes I scroll through their profiles late at night, seeing them pretend to be whole, polished, untouched, and sometimes ... I pity them. Because while I was rebuilding a life, they were building walls made of mirrors, fragile, empty, destined to shatter. The most poetic justice isn't loud. It's watching someone realize far too late that they walked away from gold thinking it was dust. And then ... a letter came. Handwritten, no return address. I opened it slowly, my hands unsure if they should shake or be still. Inside, 4 words. "Do you hate us?" That was it. No signature, no apology, no context. I read it a dozen times. Each time, the question echoed louder. Do I hate them? I didn't know how to answer, because hate requires energy, and I had stopped giving them mine. But the little boy inside me, he still wanted to know why. Why was he left behind? Why did no one come back? And so ... I wrote back, "No, I don't hate you." That would imply you still matter enough to take up that space inside me. But I grieve you. Not who you are, but who you could have been. I grieved the mother who could have held my hand when I was sick. I grieved the father who taught me how to drive. I grieved the family we never got to be but hate. No, that's not what Grandma taught me. She taught me to let go of ghosts, to build altars, not cages. So if you're asking for forgiveness, you already have it. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry you anymore. You're free, and so am I. I never mailed the letter. I just left it on her grave. Because if they ever truly want redemption, they'll know where to find it. Not in money, not in posts, but in the shadow of the woman they tried to erase and the man she raised in defiance of their absence. If you're still watching, maybe you've lived some part of this story. Maybe you've been the one left behind, or maybe you were the one who walked away. Either way, you're not alone. Drop a comment below. Let your story breathe. And if you believe healing is louder, then hey, subscribe. This isn't just a channel, it's a home for the broken, the rising, the rebuilding. We don't forget, but we do move forward. Peace doesn't come all at once. It arrives in fragments. A quiet morning, a meal shared with someone who sees you, a laugh you didn't expect. After the letter, something shifted inside me. I stopped waking up with the weight of what they did. I started waking up thinking about what I could do. The money never changed me, but it gave me space. And space, when used with purpose, becomes sacred. I started fixing up the second barn, not for storage, but for kids. Foster teens from the county began coming by on weekends. I turned the space into a creative studio. Old couches, art supplies, books, music, equipment. A place where no one asked, "Why were you left behind?" Just, "What do you want to create today?" And they did. Paintings, poems, beats, stories. One girl painted a giant mural on the far wall. A grandmother holding a boy under a tree. I didn't ask her why. I just nodded and said, "It's beautiful." Because it was, that barn became the heart of the land. Grandma's spirit lived there, not through candles or prayers, but through the sound of healing where there used to be silence. People started noticing. The sheriff dropped by once, brought his own son. A local paper did a story, "The heir who planted more than roots." I hated the title. I wasn't the heir. I was the product of her fight. And one day, a letter came, not from my parents, from someone else. "My name is Maria. I knew your grandmother back when we were girls. She used to talk about you all the time. She said you were born with a storm in your soul, but that you'd learn to use it for good one day. I live 2 towns over. Run a youth shelter. I was wondering if we could meet." I didn't expect anything, just another person trying to do good. But when she arrived, she was carrying one of Grandma's quilts. "I thought you should have this," she said. She gave it to me when I lost my daughter, told me, "When you can breathe again, pass it forward." We sat on the porch, drinking sweet tea and watching the trees move. She told me about her work, about the teens she'd helped, about the ones she'd lost. And I told her about the barn, the kids, the legacy. There was no romantic music swelling in the background, no dramatic realization. Just to people who had lived through fire and didn't let it burn them bitter. She became a friend, then a partner, then something. I didn't know I was still capable of hoping for. We didn't talk about the money. We talked about what mattered. Purpose, service, healing. And I saw it clear as day. Maybe Grandma hadn't just saved me. Maybe she planted a seed in me that would save others. But the past has a funny way of circling back. One day, I was at the grocery store when I saw him. My father, older, smaller, somehow, dressed in plain clothes, pushing a half-empty cart, reading labels like every penny counted. He looked up, saw me, our eyes locked. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I didn't look away. I didn't flinch. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out. Then he just nodded. A tiny, broken nod like a man who finally saw the door he closed and realized it would never open again. I nodded back. Not out of pity, not out of forgiveness, but out of closure. Because sometimes the greatest power is not speaking at all. Sometimes walking past the past without dragging it with you is the final victory. I left the store feeling lighter. That night, I told Maria. She took my hand and said, "Are you okay?" And for the first time in my life, I meant it when I said, "Yeah, I really am." Because forgiveness isn't weakness. It's choosing not to carry a corpse on your back in closure. It doesn't come from apologies. It comes from no longer needing them. Maybe someone watching this knows what I mean. Maybe you've been haunted by someone who walked away, someone who should have stayed, someone who saw your worth and chose not to see it. Let me say this to you. You don't need their sorry to be whole. You don't need their return to be complete. You are not their mistake. You are not their absence. You are not their failure to love. You are you, and that is more than enough. A year later, on the anniversary of Grandma's passing, we held a gathering. Not a funeral, a celebration. Kids from the barn, families from the community, even strangers who'd only read about her. We planted a tree where her ashes had been, spread hung lanterns from the branches, and everyone wrote letters, things they wished they'd said to someone they lost. I wrote mine on simple paper. Thank you for choosing me, for seeing worth where others saw weight. I miss you every day, ... but I carry you in everything I do. We burned the letters together, not in sorrow, but in release, watching the smoke rise like prayers with no need for answers. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something bigger. If this story reminded you of someone, if it helped you feel less alone, ... subscribe, not because of the algorithm, but because we're building something sacred here, a digital home for the ones who survived. Leave a comment. Tell me what you're healing from, or just say, I'm still standing. That's enough. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that love can outlive abandonment. That legacy is louder than betrayal. We're not just telling stories, we're rewriting endings together. The days passed softly after that. There was no drama, no chaos, just purpose. I kept working on the land, running programs with Maria, building the legacy Grandma planted, the kind of legacy that doesn't flash ... it roots. But peace, real peace, it doesn't mean life stops testing you. It came in the form of another envelope. Cream-colored, expensive, embossed initials. I recognized instantly RJC Richard James Callahan, my father's full name. Inside, an invitation. You are invited to attend the reading of the private addendum to the estate of Margaret Callahan, to be held confidentially at Whitmore and Associates on Thursday, 10 a.m. At first I thought it was a mistake. Her estate had already been settled, every detail, every clause. Why would there be more? I called Whitmore. He didn't say much, only she planned everything. Just come. Maria offered to come with me, but I needed to go alone. Something told me this was personal. The office was the same as before, wood-paneled, cold coffee smell. Stacks of paper like mountains of old stories. Whitmore greeted me like always, professional.com/piercing gaze. But there was someone else in the room. A woman in her 60s, sharp cheekbones, dressed modestly, but with presence. She looked at me with eyes that didn't blink. Whitmore gestured to a chair. This is Eleanor, he said. She's the executor of the sealed addendum. I sat. Whitmore opened a locked drawer and pulled out a worn leather notebook. My grandmother's handwriting covered the first page. If he's hearing this, it means enough time has passed. Enough time for him to grow roots, to find peace, to build something without being shaken by the past. But there's one last seed to plant. Whitmore played a second recording, her voice again. I knew the day would come when your father would try again, not to love you, but to reclaim something. He will come back once he's lost everything, and he will have lost it all. Money, image, power. But you, my boy, you'll have what I always hoped you would. Clarity. Now, here's the truth. A pause, her breath audible. Your father forged my name on a property deed when you were 10. He stole one of the lands I'd set aside for you to build a home on one day. I froze. I let it happen. I didn't take it to court. I didn't want to drag you into that darkness back then, but I made a plan. Eleanor slid a file toward me. Inside a lawsuit. Already prepared, already signed, already authorized. The land could be reclaimed legally, publicly, completely, and not just reclaimed. There was more. That land had since been sold and developed into a luxury retirement resort, profitable, visible, and tied directly to my father's name. Whitmore leaned in. If you pursue this, the entire operation becomes part of your estate, and he loses everything that still bears his signature. I stared at the papers, at the notarized documents, at the opportunity to crush what little remained of the man who crushed me. It would be simple, legal, clean, brutal. But I didn't answer right away. I went home, sat on the porch with the quilt on my lap, watched the sun go down like I used to with her beside me. And I heard her again. Don't hate them forever, but never let them take what I gave you. The next morning, I signed the documents. Not out of vengeance, but because truth deserves a name on it. Not his. Mine. The story hit the news fast. Callahan Resort changes ownership amid family legal dispute. Estranged son reclaims inheritance in final twist of family drama. But I didn't do interviews. I didn't make a statement. I just changed the name of the property, Margaret's Place. And then I did something my father never would have. I turned part of the resort into a free facility for elderly residents without family. No luxury, just dignity. Because the best Revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. It's taking the stones thrown at you and building something no one can tear down. And then one day, I saw him again. He came to the property, tried to get past security, said he just wanted to talk. I didn't let him in, but I did send a note. You taught me abandonment. She taught me legacy. I chose her. I never heard from him again. And I don't need to. Because justice, real justice, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a signature, a deed, a name being removed from something that never truly belonged to them, and a legacy being sealed forever in the right hands. If you've made it this far, if you've stayed with me through every word, then maybe, just maybe, you were meant to, because life will betray you. People will fail you. Even family will leave scars you carry for years. But the choice, what you do with that pain, that choice is always yours. You can bury it, or you can build with it. My grandmother planted seeds in a graveyard and made a garden. Now, it's my turn to do the same. Maybe it's yours too. If this story lit even a flicker in your heart, subscribe. Not just to follow a channel, but to stand with a community of survivors, rebuilders, and truth tellers. Comment below. Let me know you're here. Let me know you're still standing. And share this with someone who needs to remember. Abandonment is not the end. It can be the beginning, of everything. Some stories don't end. They echo. Even when the last chapter is written, the feeling lingers like the warmth of someone's hand long after they've let go. It's been 2 years since the funeral. The garden behind the house is full now, rows of vegetables, sunflowers reaching for the sky, vines curling like fingerprints through the fence. We named it the second chance garden. Every kid who comes through the barn plants something. They write their name on a little wooden stake beside it. We tell them, this is yours, this grows because of you. And they believe it. They need to. Because most of them have never been told they made something beautiful just by showing up. Maria and I got married quietly under the oak tree where Grandma used to sit. No tuxedos, no photographers. Just us, the kids from the program, and a handwritten letter from my grandmother that Whitmore gave me the day before. It simply said, you are the fruit of faith. Water others like I watered you. I cried when I read that. Not because I missed her, that ache never leaves, but because I finally understood what she meant all along. She wasn't just saving me, she was training me, preparing me to save others. I still live in the farmhouse. I could have moved to something bigger, flashier. But there's something holy about walking the same floorboards that held me up when I was broken. There's something sacred about staying. And there's something healing about hearing laughter in rooms that once held silence. Every once in a while, I still get messages from people who say, I wish I had someone like your grandma. I was the kid left behind, I thought I was the only one. You're not. If you're watching this now, you're proof that broken beginnings don't have to write your ending. You don't need a perfect family to have a future. You just need one person, one act of love, one door that doesn't close when you knock on it in the rain. People ask me sometimes, do you forgive them? And I tell them the truth. Forgiveness isn't a door you open once. It's a hallway you walk through every day. Some days, you make it to the other side. Other days, you don't. But you keep walking. I don't hate them. I don't wish them harm. I simply released them, released the weight, the longing, the fantasy of what could have been. Because there's no future in waiting for ghosts to apologize, and sometimes the best way to love yourself is to walk away from the people who wouldn't stay. The land they tried to take is thriving. Now, we opened a retreat center, not for profit, for healing. Survivors of emotional abuse, foster youth who aged out without support, single mothers trying to restart their lives. We don't offer miracles, just peace. And the reminder that being seen is sometimes the first step toward being whole. There's a room at the center, quiet wooden floors, a single chair by the window, and on the wall a framed photo of Grandma. No caption, no quote, just her smile. Because some faces carry more legacy than 1,000 words ever could. One evening, just before sunset, I found myself walking the edge of the property. The sky was purple and gold. The air smelled like rosemary and old books. And I thought back to that 8-year-old boy on the porch, suitcase soaked, heart cracked, eyes searching the horizon for someone who would stay. He had no idea what was coming. The pain, the loss, the love, the redemption, the justice that would arrive in whispers instead of thunder. If I could speak to him now, I'd kneel down and say, they left, but someone better stayed. And one day, You'll become the kind of man who plants trees you'll never sit under, just like she did for you. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because someone out there is still waiting for their justice, still wondering if the hurt will ever end, still believing they were the problem. You weren't, you aren't, you were just ... misplaced. And maybe this is the moment your soul finds its way home. If you made it here to the very end, then maybe your heart has been whispering, "This sounds like me." If it does, then subscribe. Not to follow me, but to follow hope. Drop a comment, just say, "I'm still here." That's all. Because here, being still here, is already a victory. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone carrying the weight of someone else's silence, send this to them. Not as a story ... but as a mirror. Because this isn't just my story, it's ours. A story of survival, of scars. That became maps, of silence, that became music, of betrayal, that became the seed of something divine. They left me, but love stayed. And in the end, that's all I ever needed.